Okay, great. I think everybody's here and we can get started now.
Perfect, perfect. So, what is good, everyone? I would like to welcome everybody to the latest installment of the Culture Fusion Masterclass. My name is Nalan Sidafal, and I am a alumnus of the illustrious North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. And I'm glad to see everybody up in here today. Now, we have some very great people coming from Translation LLC. It's a company that empowers brands and artists to thrive in this contemporary culture. And today we have Sandi Preston, I hope I pronounced that correctly, a strategy officer over at Translation LLC. And she has over 10 years of translator experience. She's an expert in strategic marketing, and she has just some amazing skills under her belt in terms of entrepreneurship, and even owns her own yoga class and worked with companies from Apple to AT&T all the way over to the NBA. And we also have Chauncey Barnes. So excited.
Chaucer.
Chaucer, excuse me. So my goodness. Chaucer Barnes, thank you. A marketing officer who is a creative and strategic leader in this industry. And he has over 15 years of advertising experience as well as media brokerage experience, and also is a very great independent musician. Now, with that said, to pass it off to the moderator, the queen of NYC all the way down to the DMV, Miss Deshaunda Brown. Take it away.
Oh Lord, well that was such a great introduction, Queen. Wow, I've never been called that before. Thank you. Well, first and foremost, hi everybody. Super excited to have this conversation, especially as someone who is a Black person and a Black woman who works in communications. I think it's super important to have conversations surrounding advertising, marketing, PR, and all that stuff, especially for our young people. So, just kicking off the first question, what is the history behind Translation LLC and how is it different from any other ad agency?
Oh boy, that's actually something we were really excited to get into with you guys today.
Yay!
We will see more, you will hear more as we talk you through a little bit of, our show. Translation was founded by Steve Stout. I'm not sure if everyone knows who Steve Stout is, but Steve Stout comes from the music industry. He was president of Black Music at Interscope Records for many years. And at the very ripe age of 30 years old, he decided to flip his own script and shift from the music industry into marketing, because he saw not just the need of, I would say, representation, which if you guys have been following Steve at all lately, you'll hear him quite a bit passionate talking about the topic of African American strategy and the importance of thinking more holistically about this particular audience and our influence as it relates to marketing and business overall. But he was struck by an opportunity, which we'll unpack as we get into the presentation, and really looking at how to reach fans at the level, not of just products, not just of branding traditionally, but culture. Like what motivates people, what moves them, what it really inspires them to do what they do, think what they do, and then ultimately go out and buy what they buy. So there's a lot of our DNA that I think is still rooted in that motivation, just really coming to a very central cultural understanding of people and mindsets and how we move. And, as a fearless leader, I think he's been very passionate about always being a pacemaker in that way, like he sets the pace for how the industry should move. And our ambition, as you so wonderfully put it, Nylan, thank you, are absolutely about helping ambitious brands thrive in contemporary culture. And all of our work, some of which we'll talk about today, is to stand up against that mission and stand up against that creed. Anything you want to add, Charles?
Nah, I think that was perfectly put. As far as that's the origins of the company, I would say the thing that distinguishes us today, as outside of Stout and the direction that we're pointed, is the collection of people that call the agency home. We are the only Black-owned independent agency that swings at the type of work that we do. We work all across the general market with some of those brands that Nylan mentioned earlier, and we are alone in that right. That is not to take a swipe at any other Black-owned shops, but it's a very narrow company, and we take great pride in making sure that we stock the company with people who are reflective of the consumers that we hope to persuade. And we also hope to stock the company with people who can consider translation a first step into the industry, even if they don't stay under our roof for the longest time, like a Sandi, Preston, and Chaucer. It's important for us to give a head start to and to give some field time to Black and brown people who would not otherwise find their way to the industry. And we do that not just by looking through ad schools, but by really looking to find creativity where it thrives, whether it's in the music industry, on the independent side, whether it's that person that that is getting really nice at editing. We look for those people irrespective of their kind of previous interest in advertising. By the way, I'm seeing A&T heavy in here. I'm from Greensboro. I'm those Barneses from Barnes Hall. It's just so nice to see this Aggie presence heavy like this. Shout out to y'all.
There is a lot of y'all. And I went to Spelman, so shout out to the Spelman, the Morehouse, and the CAU, all the AUC people in there. I see you. Now, I know a lot of people, including myself, when I first started off in the communications industry as an assistant publicist, I didn't really understand the difference between marketing and advertising because it's under the umbrella of communications. Like you have PR, marketing, brand management. But can you provide a brief breakdown of the difference between marketing and advertising and how they both work together to create a powerful brand?
I will take a stab at that first. I think it comes down to a level of nuance, right? I think traditionally you may describe advertising as the end product that marketing informs, right? So when we receive what we call a brief, which is the client's distillation of what they desire to put out in the world, or the impression of the perceptual shift that they like to make, we typically work with a marketing department who is overseeing that. They are looking at all the traditional, P's, right? The product, that they're looking at how we can go about understanding what the clear business objectives are that they're trying to move. And in working in partnership with the marketing department, it informs internally, so at the company, how we go about solving for that particular business problem, whether it's centric to the brand, meaning, we need people to feel differently about State Farm, right? Or if it's about a particular product, we need to serve auto and home policies for State Farm. No matter what that particular client asks, it is our responsibility to translate that in a way that consumers are motivated to do something differently. And so I think if you come back to the rawest terms, for me, advertising is the closest sphere to the public sector, to the consumer, to the end user. We ultimately become the storytellers that the marketing team informs in order to drive that particular result.
Yeah, I suppose my only addition to that would be, over time, it's really started to blend. And I think some of the best kind of world-class organizations don't make that distinction. You kind of have to, from an org chart perspective. You staff certain people and they have certain responsibilities and they're on the hook for things. But when you think about marketing as just a pure, like the etymology of the word, it means to take something to market. And there are different disciplines that would fall underneath that. Advertising is one of them, but never, ever, ever count out a really brilliant product person who has a marketing idea that doesn't manifest itself in advertising. So for example, I give you Tom Shoes. Tom Shoes, the product is the advertising. It holds an idea with it. And all they have to do is kind of spur that myth of me wearing these means some other kid is wearing these somewhere else. And that's just a great example of an idea that could have come out of an advertising agency. And I kind of wish it come out of ours. But the application is really product design. So I would say the best companies is merging, but org charts are org charts.
And one of my last questions before we head to, your fabulous presentation, what would you say, both of you can answer, what would you say are the 5 key factors to creating any successful advertising campaign?
Well, I'll get started with a couple. one is to not look at it as advertising. You're going to hear us talk a bit about this, but when we talk about the business that we're in, it's more than just the ad itself. We really get close, and we get close to the audience that we're aiming to connect with. We get close to the networks that audience lives within, and we think about a way to tell stories that they see themselves in, so then they go and continue to share that story on our behalf. And so it's less about just, I would say, the very linear from the advertiser to the advertisee, the person receiving the ad. It's more about the story that's happening in between, and what is the real outcome we're driving that has a cultural impact. Because I think a really good ad begins to live on less about what the product really was they were trying to sell, and it's about what the effect it had on people. And you'll hear us talk about it, but if we look at our business, it's not the ad business, but the business of culture, then our reference points becomes not other ad campaigns of success. It's who else is actually driving culture forward. That is the level that our marketing, our advertising needs to hit. And you start to look at that from all different arenas of culture: music, the literary aspect, fashion, sports. And when you put yourself in that category, in the category of culture, not in the category of advertising, it completely resets your measures of success, right? And we start there. We start at really the cultural truth. Like what ultimately are we tapping into that's going to drive a cultural effect? And I think when you start there, then your endpoints are different. And so that wasn't cleanly 5 things, but I would say that's definitely the start of our journey that takes us to a distinct place than you would just a normal approach to an ad campaign.
Yeah, I don't want to step on some of the conclusions that we baked in the slides either, but I'll offer from my vantage point, I think one central thing to really hover around that has visited me, and just so you know, I've operated in kind of the media buying angle. So like the person that places the ad, I've been the person to make the ad, I've been the person to make the festival, whatever. And I think the biggest truth you can hold real high is measure the right things. There's a lot of conversation about data and intelligence in advertising, and it is so often it enables people to make stupid things sound smart. And if you're measuring the right things, and if you're really fluent with the measurement kind of dynamics, you can make the smart things sound smart. So I'll give you an example of that, right? People take trailing data all the time, and they're like, this has never happened, therefore it never will. And you saw demography, for example, fall apart in the music industry 20 years ago. 20 years ago, in the music industry, everybody told you radio is a bellwether for how successful something is going to be. So if you take it to radio and it catches, and there's radio coverage in that geographic footprint, then of course the CD is going to move off the shelves. And then what happened was you started getting the DMXs of the world, and DMX couldn't get played on a radio station in Wichita, Kansas. DMX couldn't get played, fly over Oklahoma, whatever, what have you, but all the CDs are moving off the shelf. And when you see something like that, you got a choice. You get to go, oh, maybe our trailing data was wrong. Maybe the conventional wisdom was wrong. Or you go, well, that's an anomaly. And as Black folk, we're always hearing that's an anomaly when we happen to know that's the truth. And where the rubber meets the road and being able to sell in the kind of work that, that we're proud of, that we like to stand beside, it almost always starts with measurement. Like, yo, I bet you didn't know this. And I can show you, I can tell this story a million different ways. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about one case study, but we all know we have conventional wisdom that people like to match their hat to their shoes or their belt or what have you. But the proverbial, they don't know that. So you go to New Era 7 years ago, if you walk in a New Era and they're trying to figure out why the Seattle Mariners hat is selling They're busy looking at all of the things that would have made a hat skew take off for them historically. Who got traded? Is baseball actually coming back alive? Is there somebody from Detroit and Chicago and DC on that team? Why would anybody be buying a Seattle Mariners hat? And you know, it's because the KD's released in a colorway that pings off those Mariners colors. But you got to find a way to measure that up front and to tell somebody that story and data up front, because there's a bunch of people who are explaining with all of their data why you don't have the right idea. It's my biggest thing. If I have one piece of advice to give, measure the right thing. And with that.
Then that was my last question. It was a short panel, but I feel like everybody, including myself, got a lot of information from it. So thank you to both of you. Super duper appreciate it, especially as someone who's still growing and learning in the communications industry herself. I definitely learned a lot from the both of you. And I'm gonna hand it back over to Nyland.
Perfect. So from here we have going to be getting a couple of questions. Oh,
Are we doing questions? My bad.
Oh no, you can go ahead and get into the slides. Go ahead.
Okay.
Right. We're going to the slides. Excuse me. We're going to the slides, and this is where you get your time to shine.
All right. Is that crispy? Is that full bleed?
As full bleed on my end.
Yes.
Super 4K.
Well, we're happy to jump into this because I think the questions, thank you for giving us an opportunity, Deshonda, to just kind of open up and introduce ourselves. If you see this title slide, you'll notice there are two logos on this page, right? Translation and, dropping things, United Masters. It's two logos, but we're one company. Traditionally, you may describe this left side translation as advertising. As I mentioned, we try to kill that word advertising agency within our halls. We are, however, yes, a creative services team that from our inception has always been about finding that red thread within culture that's going to help an ambitious brand thrive. And then on the right side, United Masters, which was, or is rather, a music services company that's really aimed to operationalize independent artists to help turn their cultural currency that is uniquely their own into financial gain. Together as one company, we are on a relentless pursuit to better understand, to Chaucer's point around data, to better quantify, still around data, and ultimately leverage, and this is where the creativity comes in, the power of culture and business. And the reason for this pursuit is really rooted in a core belief. So if we go to the next slide, this notion that we believe that in today's world, the most powerful force for creating financial capital is cultural capital. We talked a little bit about the driving force, like what makes a new color of a hat go that didn't go before, right? Understanding the cultural impact, the cultural thread, the cultural current that has come before it, that has created this motivation and this shift in consumer behavior, being able to understand that and then in a way put it in a capsule and then inject it into our ideas is really what we've set out to do since day one and continue to do in partnership with the sister arm of our company through music, which is United Masters. Speaking of music, bouncing to the next page. If you ever hear Steve Stout talk, he will talk about the undeniable impact of Run DMC on Adidas, right? It may beg the question, who would Adidas be today if there were no Run DMC? And for everyone who is either a proud child of the 80s or you've just come of age and you know this backstory, when these shell top Adidas launched, it was really that group of three Black men with their rope chains, and they're coming together and seeing cross opportunities with genre, working with Aerosmith, bringing this to the forefront of culture. There was never a deal, right? There was never a marketing team that sat down at a table that said, we need these rappers from Queens to come and wear our shoes and go on stage in order to get kids in that suburb to buy. But that happened, right? And then the rest is history. And when you think about that experience, that crossover between music, fashion, even a little bit of sport and culture, that is something that we feel is the undeniable impact of really drives not only culture for it, but then the financial gain for companies like Adidas who are seeking to make a connection with different audiences. That being said, the inception of Translation as a business really started when Steve Stout, who I mentioned was president of Black Music at Interscope, was overseeing the production of the Man in Black soundtrack, the original. And as a music exec, he sat back and watched the Ray-Bans that the men were wearing in the film completely outsell the soundtrack, which was playing throughout the entire movie as well. And he wanted to understand the underpinnings of that. What motivates consumers seeing those glasses in this particular realm, this film, motivated to go out and purchase, so much so that it's being outsold by or it is overselling or selling more than, how about that, the actual soundtrack itself. If you transfer that same knowledge over to any domain, be it music, be it sports, be it fashion, you're going to see this happen time and time again. So much so that this belief around culture and its power is really about the trajectory, right? It's honoring the fact that this is something that we've seen happening over time. And for the most part, many quote unquote advertisers and marketers have ignored it. If you click to the next slide. Oh, you have me set up differently. There we go. There we go. There we go. This is where we're landing. These moments we consider historic. If you sit down in other boardrooms, nope, they would not even necessarily cite any of these cultural moments that you've seen, whether it's Men in Black, Run DMC, even the Bad Boys reference, right? They will not be honored as historical moments. For us in the business of culture, they were, because it's just as much a relic to what has been, to what is happening right now, and that this is continuing to be a world-changing phenomenon for us. We're constantly seeing it. So if we spell these particular situations in current context, if you flip to the next slide, Adidas. Here we are again, revisiting, very well known, but look at the difference between what happened to Adidas in a 2-year span versus what happened with Nike. There's a big difference in the two, and there's a reason for the difference. I'll give you a clue. His name is in the upper left corner of this page. Kanye West's impact on Adidas and the way that his brand as an artist, no matter what people may feel about him, but his impact, his role, his ideas as a creator, bringing that in collaboration with, yes, Adidas, who has the history of Run DMC, who has the history in music, shifted this from being a sneaker brand to a culture brand, point blank. There's still aspects, of course, that Nike that everyone loves, right? But when you see the trajectory of the Adidas brand and partnership, a collaboration with Kanye West with the launch of Yeezys, there's an outsized growth, not just in how many shoes were being purchased, how many people were interested in the brand, but what was the total impact of Adidas and Kanye and culture during this moment in time. We've seen this again. If you click to the next slide, Apple is one of the most valued brands in culture. It's usually top 5, or at least 3 maybe, favorite brands that you ask any consumer. This highly valuable brand invested more dollars than it ever has in any acquisition in its history ever to buy Beats. Why, right? Beats by Dre, not known to be the best quality at the time, but had all of the creative and cultural cachet that Apple knew it needed to continue to stay relevant in its certain realm product. And as we think about the Beats brand itself, you know, you could put them next to Apple and think they're completely juxtaposed, right? Apple's kind of clean these days, doesn't necessarily fit the grit, even the ballsiness of a Beats brand, but Apple decided who it needed to stand next to stay relevant. And I think that is something that's really interesting, because Bose was not the brand, right? You're not looking at the person who looks most like you. They're looking at the brand that was going to help them diversify not only their audience, but how the audience views them as a brand. And this impact on culture can be taken well outside the realms of just directly advertising, marketing. We've seen it happen on the big screen, right? Black Panther surpassed the Titanic on all-time box office list. I'm pretty sure everyone who is in this chat, in this particular session, maybe, I'm gonna make an assumption, went to see this once, if not twice, at the box office, right? I see the Wakanda, I see that, there we go. All the Wakandas coming up, because this is a marked moment in our history, right? Where we're seeing the impact of Black culture, a Black point of view, Black actors, Black empowerment, everything sort of happening in this apex moment with this movie. And if we think about the impact that has on culture, it resets the tone of what really is total market at this point. If you have Black Panther outselling Titanic, if you have more people going to watch this than any other Marvel film, what then is general market? And how are we really giving credence and onus to the importance of creation and influence of not just Black people, but the Black experience and the total experience that we know as culture today? So if you click to the next slide. Historically, we've been looking at these moments within a pocket of culture, here, 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 here. Now, as we think about how these moments are all laddering together, this is about transforming business. This is about being able to see the threads, being able to see the curves. And as Steve would put it, our fearless leader, see around the corner, right? To inform what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. Why do we do it? Next page. There are 3 reasons. 3 specific reasons. And Chaucer touched on these. Are you bouncing in?
No, I'm just in the wrong deck.
I'm happy to pass the baton, given that you already spoke to the decline of demography and its impact.
Nah, B, hold that thought. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm just in the wrong deck. That's all. Cool.
I thought things looked different, but you know, it's a bit of a freestyle culture in our part. So I'm like, let's roll with it.
This is actually, so there's longer talk. If you want to see longer talk, it's out there. You can find it on the internet. But we wanted to keep this to 20 minutes because we wanted to keep the Q&A as fluffy as we could. So we just wanted to give a quick overview of how cultural capital can be harnessed by any brand. And this is really important, as any brand is really important to us, because it's wild easy to make things that are already cool. It's wild easy to make things that are expertly designed, adopted. And that's not to say that we are in the business of like finding the broke down kind of, suspect things to make pop culture phenoms out of, but we wanted to show this on a stage where you're marketing something that's intangible. So in this case, wireless connection, wireless service. And we wanted to talk about AT&T. So AT&T, a couple of things to know about AT&T. AT&T is upmarket, meaning they are the second highest priced cell phone provider most people have access to. And for years, they turned a blind eye to not just Black, not just brown, not just young, but urbane customers, meaning it's a geographic dimension, it's a demographic dimension, both in age and race. And they had just let these consumers go. You know why? Because the trailing data told them that if we fish over here in these flyover states, in these household incomes of 160 plus, blah, 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 we're going to get more bang for our marketing buck. But you know what happens? AT&T then, years later, after years of ignoring all of these people in these major cities, these naturally more tan, younger, age down groups of people, they had lost their command of these cities. And you can see it in every single map. So you know how you see like an AT&T ad or any cell phone ad and it'll show you the map. It's like, we've got more coverage coast to coast and blah, 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 blah. All right, they're talking about their connectivity. If you talked about it in terms of their market penetration, everything along the sides on that map would go dark because they had lost their hold on major cities. And as we know, the key to those major cities and the things that hold those major cities together are the networks, the rituals, artifacts that are specific to it. That's why people spend billions and trillions of dollars in sports, because they're trying to access something about local people, local passions and prides and rituals, and they didn't have it. Add to that, AT&T had just completed the biggest acquisition in all of media history by buying Time Warner Media. And so now you have Warner Media Group as a part of your company. Warner Media Group makes its money by having people's attention. And guess what? You, as the parent brand, you can't get nobody's attention. And oh, by the way, all of those people who you thought couldn't afford your cell phone service plans, etc., that's exactly who you need to get to pay attention to anything, for anybody else to care. Therefore, enter translation. And I just want to play this case study for you real quick, and you'll instantly get what this idea is.
12718-917-347 and 929. It's November 2019, and a nationwide discussion around codes of culture is in full swing. The brackets have long outgrown our 4 key markets and are everywhere, literally, even in St. Louis, Saskatchewan, and San Juan, Puerto Rico. How exactly did we get here? Simple, by being of culture and not just in culture. Let's go back to January 2019 to see how it all happened. 803-843-864, we out here. It started with a few calculated posts from our hometown heroes, where they shared their local pride through their area code. This activity triggered a flood of contributions from influencers in each city, which eventually spilled out of social media and entered the real world. AT&T then brought the brackets into these neighborhoods through hyperlocal out-of-home that celebrated the authenticity of the people, places, styles, and activities that make each city unique. Then the conversation took over the airwaves. 312, come up, show, presented by AT&T. To prove why they were the next big thing coming out of their code. I'm on the radio! Excitement hit a fever pitch when word got out that AT&T was bringing the best of each code to life through unforgettable events that would unite the entire city under one roof. The date of the event, the city's area code, translated into a calendar date.
The dream is here.
My charisma, that's just Harlem world, you dig? Nah, we ain't from New York. Nah, we ain't from LA. We from Chicago. Shortly after, AT&T created a suite of original content and, of course, starred locals only. People were so eager to participate, they hacked our blue brackets and started making their very own code names, some even pretending to be paid partners. Codes had officially hit a tipping point, and that's when AT&T knew to pass the mic to its audience. They invited the entire country to show how they rep their code on codesofculture.com. AT&T then transformed its media space into public stages that would elevate the most coded submissions onto massive billboards in their very own backyards.
Look at us, we're there!
I was so excited when I saw this over the weekend. This enormous billboard above the 3rd Avenue Bridge in Fort Morris, representing the borough in a new AT&T campaign.
Captured it with my cell phone. By the summer, the brackets began taking on a life of their own. And on July 18th, 718 Day, one of NBA's most elite athletes announced his move to Brooklyn by way of our brackets. The cultural impact was profound, and the beauty of it all is we're just getting started.
Right now, Showtime is in the 213.
All right, so boom. There's 3 takeaways we want to offer up as we lead into Q&A, and we think that you can see them in spades when you look at that campaign in the end. Number 1 is this value that we always apply to everything that we do: make the invisible impossible to ignore. When we talk about invisibility, for a lot of us, it's right there in plain sight, which is why, you know, it takes somebody writing in yellow paint Black Lives Matter on Pennsylvania Avenue before other people see it. But that's that action that makes it impossible to ignore. And now you see the spill-on effect of that, right? And so that same value carried across into comms is exactly what you're seeing right here. You're seeing amateur, quote-unquote amateur photography, things that are really meant to capture, that were just meant for somebody's Instagram post, capturing a moment where they had been out to Coney Island, you know, to do their thing as they normally do, their normal ritual, then elevated to a massive stage that only a brand can help you get to. So if you think about it from the standpoint of how can a brand help other people tell stories that they were going to tell about themselves, this is a great example of a brand behaving in such a way that that person was never going to get to. And so when we do that, not only do we as a brand stand beside those people in an unavoidable way, and that's important, unavoidable way means I don't you know, you don't scroll past it and then see me standing next to somebody else. There's something about the physicality of space and place and making sure that this is in the right place and at the right scale so that it's clear the conviction that the brand has in supporting this idea. So when we make the invisible impossible to ignore, we always, always win. And by the way, that's what you see when you look at whether you're talking about Interscope or quality control or anything else that you know of as a cultural factory. What they're doing is taking those voices, Trent Reznor, Tupac, Marilyn Manson, Eminem, 50, blah, 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 for Interscope, and they're making them impossible to ignore. These are otherwise smaller voices that they put on a big stage, and that's how they create cultural capital. Second thing we want to talk about is starting sentences, not finishing them. And there's a really important distinction because a lot of advertising is about telling stories that have a beginning, middle, and end. But as consumers have become prosumers, as they become more media savvy, and as they become more media capable, you have everything in your pocket right now to be able to create any kind of content that somebody 10 years ago, it would have cost them $150,000 to even get a shoot day to do. And as that has happened, we see consumers stepping more into the stories that they care about. And it's less about whether or not they'll pay attention to you, because you can make people pay attention sometimes, but it's more about, will they carry this forward? And people are not going to carry forward stories that don't have anything to do with them. Fundamentally, it's not just from vanity, it's because we are all curating our own brands. And as I curate my brand, and I know you all saw this in your feeds, it's like you were seeing calls for, hey, white folks, stop putting it in your stories, put Black Lives Matter in your post. That was like early on, 5 weeks ago, whatever. It's because people understand the ways in which we say something momentarily the difference between your stories and your grid is there permanently and represents you. And so if you think about that for a minute, you think about how that applies to everything else you do, you are only telling stories that make you look smart, woke, turned up, this, that, glamorous, what have you. And it's our responsibility to do that. And so when you see this, when you see all this kind of meme generation and all of these receipts, these physical receipts that came out of those physical holidays where we had, 2,000 people in the building doing everything from dancing and partying and eating the local fare to taking pictures in front of the what have you, all the way out to the physical receipts that it generated when, as you saw in the story, like, the kid, like, I'm on the radio. That's been dope since the 5 Heartbeats. The idea of, like, I'm on the radio, that's been dope since the 5 Heartbeats. And we programmed specifically for that so that we are leaving some meat on the bone for people to complete our story. We're not telling you a story with a beginning, middle, and end. We're telling you a story with a beginning and middle, and hopefully you end it for us. And then third is sign your word. There's a lot of people who couldn't tell you this with any conviction. They're not Sandi and Chaucer. And when you have these moments where you really have a brand, when you got them like this, when you actually have influence over what it is that they're going to do and the way that they're going to behave, you owe it to people behind you to send that little wink, send that little nod where they know it was you. And so the idea, can you imagine telling AT&T when they funded this thing and they spent all these tens of millions of dollars that you want to go give it the mayor of Atlanta? And they're like, yo, the mayor, I thought we were doing this down south. I thought we were doing this bounce. No. Yes. You got to go get Keisha. You got to put her in the car with Sav. It's got to be at the same time he's coming off these ICE charges. And we're going to ride around. We're going to talk about gentrification in Atlanta with both of them. Because if we don't do that, that's not getting done. So always sign your work. Make sure there's something in it that reads you, that has your fingerprints really on it. And that's not always going to be welcome. Every time that's going to be hard. But every time you're going to get that sense of satisfaction out of it, and you run the risk, you up the chances of waving somebody else into the industry behind you to do the same thing and complete that site. This is just them riding around. You can watch that online. That's it. That's it for slides. Let's get into this Q&A.
That was an amazing session. I just want to give y'all a round of applause and a virtual round of applause for that amazing session. And even thinking back when I used to intern with AT&T, I remember I was just seeing all those different advertisements and campaigns. I'm like, man, that really does stick to me. But enough about me. Let's get into some of these questions. So the first question is, how can students become a part of the translation campaigns?
So summers where they're not pandemics, we typically have internship programs where your contribution is being a part of the making, right? We typically recruit across departments, so we have what we would call the creative department, which are groups of writers and art directors, designers who help bring the idea to life. I oversee the strategy team. We are informing and inspiring the idea. We have context within our creative team that's thinking about the intersections of people, place, time, and message. And we have traditional client services or account managers who are helping to make sure all the wheels are turning in the right direction. And so on typical summers, we will always recruit students to be a part of our people, right? And to bring also that element that is so unique to youth, and that is your ear to the ground, that is the native tongue of how people are talking today and what is motivating, particularly on the element of youth culture, which I think is always a thing. But to make sure we keep that blood fresh within our walls. So at this point in time, we are not recruiting interns for this summer, but that does not mean that all points of contact are off. So I know Chaucer, as much as myself, are always open to talking, to people who are still in school, who are interested in the type of philosophy that we live by, that we create our work by. So if this is a different moment in time, I would just drop a link to your question, Brandy, and just have you send that application through. No, it's still coming. Things are just shifting around as we all adjust to this new normal, right? So, yeah.
Chaucer, you got anything to add to that?
Nah, man, I'm not gonna J. Cole that up.
Got you. Okay, so the next question is for Ms. Sandi. So what does marketing strategy at Translation look like on a day-to-day basis?
So the funny thing about day-to-day questions is that you will hear this 1,000 times over, like there's no such thing as like day-to-day. Well, there is day-to-day, right? But it's of the day, because I think another unique quality about Translation is how rooted strategy is in everything that we do. We started as a branding and consulting firm first. So we didn't have traditional creatives, making things. We were an idea shop. And we're still very much an idea shop, although we do have the creatives there to help us bring these ideas to life. So there is a process, if you will, about approaching any particular business opportunity. You always want to understand who you're talking to. You always, like I said earlier, want to understand the networks around this audience. You also want to be able to really dial down into what is the specific and unique perspective that we're bringing to solving for this client problem. So in our halls, we call it the tension, right? What's the categorical or the cultural or the human dynamic, the friction that we're aiming to solve or stand up in the face of. But I'm also, with that, pass along something that my previous chief strategy officer used to always press upon us, which was to tell all the truth, but to tell it slant. And that's the Emily Dickinson quote. And I think that is our daily quest as strategists. Find the truth, tell the truth, but to tell it slant. Give it that POV that currently doesn't exist in the world, or reframe the POV that currently exists in the world. Into life in the brief, which could be a written document. It can come to life in a full presentation similar to the one we've taken. It could come to life and, hey, I got an idea, and I go tap Chaucer's shoulder, and then Chaucer taps the shoulders of creatives who can put a pen to paper and draw it out for us. So the process is not necessarily rigid. It's a very fluid experience from a strategy standpoint, but everything comes back to finding the right truths and being able to prepare those truths into an idea.
Yeah, I would add, and I get to follow this because she's obviously the chief strategy officer, but sometimes I can't see herself. And this is one of my favorite parts about working with Sandi. I also respect and admire outside of the kind of the day-to-day client in, client out work that she and her team are doing every day. There's also unspoken keep us true. There's like an internal facing keep us true that also is running throughout the strategy practice, where they keep us smart on things that are developing. And I'm not talking about like trend reports like, yo, this record is #3 and it's climbing. Sorry, that sounded dismissive. I didn't mean it like that. I'm not talking about I'm talking about being able to shape the things that we're seeing and create containers. Like when you see Stout go out or you see me go out, and we're talking about these things and you hear us hitting those same refrains, that's generally the work of strategy, because strategy is really boiled down a couple of words that we think really captures the idea. And our job as a Black-owned company that's led by an entrepreneur, that's independent, it doesn't have major label back-end, et cetera, is to make sure that we are consistent in our tone and constantly pushing the culture forward with our scholarship. And so outside of what she does for this company or that company or whatever, what have you outside, there's also a really strong component of keeping us choppy as well.
That's nice. Very nice. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Now, for Chaucer.
Mm-hmm.
So this question, talking about a little bit in the music industry. I also came relate. I'm trying to learn my piano, or trying to learn some piano myself. So how does your background and passion in the music or in music shine through in the work that you do, being that music is such an integral part of the culture?
I can't tell if that's a question from somebody that knows my backstory, but I stumbled into the advertising business as an independent musician. So I wound up finishing school in the Mid-Atlantic. I had a degree in philosophy. I didn't know what to do with that, so I went to Portland, Oregon to play music. And the reason I went to Portland was because it was really far from home, and it was the cheapest West Coast city I could find. And at the time, I was only interested in playing music. I was only interested in building my little fan base into something that would sustain me and ultimately being able to tour my thing. And then I was pushing off adulthood. And that's how I stumbled into advertising. So I met a gentleman named Dan Wyden, one of the most famous people in advertising. He wrote Just Do It for Nike. He's that guy. And I wound up taking a job in advertising that then offset my career ambitions, because I got a lot of the same endorphin shots from being able to put campaigns in the world that I ever got getting the crowd to say, hey, when I say ho, or whatever. And so I left music behind when I was like 28, 29 years old. And one of the reasons that I am tied to the work, and I don't mean the day in, day out work of, planning, like setting up a campaign for Beats or setting up a campaign for AT&T. That's always rewarding whenever I can put some back on the street, in terms of getting exposure or light or check or a brand new opportunity to dimensionalize someone's fan base. That's always great. But for me, the big win is in United Masters. And so United Masters is founded on the notion that not only should it be table stakes that an artist own their IP, own their actual creation, but they also should own the second most valuable asset behind that, which is their audience. And in a world where, Instagram, everybody's running around like, how many Instagram followers you got, how many followers you got on TikTok, blah, 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 but they're not paying attention. In fact, you got to buy those. You got 1 million followers, you can only reach 8% of that at any given time. And so the other 92%, you got to buy those back from Instagram. And that's something that we feel like is as criminal as the historical disenfranchisement of Black people by the music industry. And so as we set out to solve those challenges, we solve it with software, we solve it with brand deals, we solve it with moving capital. The big win for me is not on any given campaign. It's on, if we get this right, we recapitalize the entire creative class, which is led by a vanguard of young Black and generally, in terms of what we're seeing right now, disenfranchised youth. And we give them a real opportunity to build an asset for themselves. And even if they don't use our software, our services, our this, that, the other, they're creating an expectation among their peers that they own the rights to their catalog. and that they own their audience. And we think that that is one of those things that just lifts all boats and really creates a pathway to financial freedom, and is the ultimate what's his name, Robin Hood move that allows us to put financial capital to work for the people who really create the culture. In other words, AT&T, Beats, Budweiser Made in America, all of that is cherries. The sundae is the whole company succeeding in its mission.
That is very nice. Miss Sandi, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I will add this. Chaucer has wooed and charmed many a client with his vocal capabilities, which I won't put him on the spot to to serenade us on this call. But no, I agree with them. I think, you know, music being an integral part of culture, music being an integral part of our DNA as a company from, you know, inception, and of course, ever more important with our sisterhood, our bond, our locking arms with the United Masters. That is absolutely an undercurrent to much of the work that we do. And to Chaucer's point, you know, there's probably no cleaner read on the impact of cultural capital and financial capital as much as through the music industry, and us setting out to turn that on its head and give that power back to the artist is something that is very translation. That's my two.
Nice. So then I believe that this will be our last question, and really just think long and hard about this one. And this one's actually coming from me. So in this room, we have 28, about 29 young student, or just people in here that are getting ready to be the next generation of movers and shakers. And being that this is a company that focuses on cultural capital, I gotta ask, from your perspective, how can we, as this next generation of entrepreneurs, X, Y, and Zs, how can we both build up this cultural capital and make sure that we're maintaining it and properly nurturing it so that we can do whatever we want to do? And if that means giving back to our community, giving back to our people, giving back to anybody, or doing what we want to do with this cultural capital. How do we get there? How do we maintain it? And what do you think we should do once we have it?
First, I want to tell you the importance of that question, the sheer importance of it. Well, I'll start with one thing that struck me. I'm a strategist, so I get all up in words. I know it's like semantics and whatnot, but something you said that I find striking, right, is how do we build up this cultural capital? And I feel that of this group that we're talking to right now, it's in you, right? You already have it. And I think our responsibility when we go into the world and we share it, right, is how do we continue to keep a level of ownership over it? How are we helping propagate each other and the things that we share? So like helping push each other along and being really mindful of, right, who we choose to stand next to, you know? And it occurs to me as I was talking about the Adidas slide and Kanye, there's a lot that we do for the culture. But as we talked about internally at our agency, when we say the culture, let's be honest, we're talking about Black culture. And, you know, we still ain't got our reparations. We still probably not going to get our cultural reparations for everything that we contributed. But I think there's a level of just mindfulness, right? And how we're really continuing to cultivate what is already uniquely ours and already uniquely in us. And it's a responsibility that in the world of media, in the world of communications, you constantly feel that sense of duty, right? Like I'm always questioning, especially in the time that we're in right now when like ancient mama's being pulled off the box. What? It only took 100 years, you know, like as we start to see things like this happen, it's like how are we continuing to contribute to ways that are progressing the culture forward, right? And it's easy to put something out there and know when it's hot and know when it's gonna work, but I think you have to also think about a bit of the long game, right? Like, and what's the true desired outcome with what we're putting out in the world. And let's be protective of that outcome. Let's do what we can to fight for that outcome. And sometimes that feels like it's at all cost, because like I said, Angel Mama just got pulled out the box, and sometimes you have to continue to fight for the right thing to protect what's ours, even if it's our face, our name, our music, our lines, etc.
I would damn, that's hard to follow up. I'll try. The biggest piece of advice, I mean, I can give you, you started with youth, right? And man, it's dark days out here. We're at the lip of a depression. You know, there's all kinds of psychic and physical and spiritual danger afoot. And there are green shoots of Black solidarity, Black economic cooperation, and so on and so forth, that may, you know, grow into something, may wither and die. And that's a lot to take on as a generation, right? Because everybody, like, you've always heard it all your life, like it's gonna depend on you. Like, you got to do this work, because if not you, who, that kind of thing. And you know, I don't want to be. That's why I want to start from that place and acknowledge that reality and the density of it, the weight of it, before I say what I'm going to say, because I don't want it to come off glib. And the real answer for me is people who mint, preserve, build, grow their cultural capital, for me, have one through line, and that's that they continue to invest in self. And they do that through curiosity. And every time you start to feel like, you know, if I just get there, if I just get to 6 figures, if I just get to this, if I just get that address, if I just get that car, if I just get that husband, if I just get that thing that keeps you on the treadmill, like that sense of like acquiring things, and other signals of success, of feelings of safety. I think the real trick, when I see people who really have command of their cultural capital, they take that safety and they bank that, and then they head back in and they look for something to add to their repertoire, to consistently, continuously learn and add into their repertoire, and doing things that, frankly, endanger that safety that they earn. And there's no real way around that. And that's a really difficult thing to swallow, when if you make it through, you're going to make it through against the worst economic headwinds of anybody that anybody alive has ever seen. But it's not going to make it any less true. You know, there's a difference between MJ and LeBron. There's a bunch of differences between MJ and LeBron, but as much as we respect the OG and we watch The Last Dance and blah, 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 you can see in LeBron that being the GOAT at that thing on the hardwood is not enough for him. And it's him moving into all of these other spaces and places and exacting his will in the world. That's what's required of greatness. And that's why his cultural capital is where it is. And that is the recipe to continuing to do that. So if you're not willing to risk what you manage to accumulate, I fear for you. I rarely see it. I rarely see somebody step out on faith that they're going to learn a new skill. Shout out to you, man, for be like, yo, I'm learning the piano. I'm sure you know there's 6-year-olds playing the piano. My baby girl just walked in. She's been playing the piano for 3 years. You got to stay in that spirit. Like, there's nothing I can't read. There's nothing I can't learn. There's nothing I can't acquire. There's nothing I can't try. That's the only thing I've seen in the people and the organizations that really have that thing. And I know it's a tall order.
Thank you so much, man. I really do appreciate that. And everybody in the audience just shouting out just all the love. We really do appreciate y'all. And just real quick, if you could just give like one piece of advice from the both of y'all to all of us young entrepreneurs, accountants, any of that, all of that, what would you give us as like a little parting gift?
I'm going to borrow one of my stout favorites. We call them stoutisms. Know what you don't know, you know, and maybe Chaucer was just speaking to it in terms of staying curious, but you know, there's a lot out here to keep expanding us and keep pushing us, you know, and I think there's value in ignorance, and sometimes, you know, you have to fake it to even start to see truth again, you know, and, you know, again, back to that strategic quality of always looking for truth, always aiming for truth. Don't get so smart that you think you know it all, right? And there's an element of that that keeps you very open. It keeps you vibrating, right? Here I go into my yoga thing, but it keeps you vibrating at a certain receptive frequency, right? That it's going to make you keep expanding. It's going to keep you evolving. And I don't care if that's career wise or beyond, you know, it all comes together at a certain point. So I would keep that openness, whether that's in mind or spirit, or just to Chaucer's point, what you read and what you listen to, what you practice new every day. Stay open.
That's nice.
Unfortunately, I got to go back to my old refrain. If I had any parting advice, and it's funny because I started talking about it in the context of marketing and advertising, and now that you've mentioned, we got accountants in here, we got this, that, the other in here. I'm going to say it again. I think this is great advice, no matter what you're doing, even though it came up talking about my industry. Measure the right things. That's really the thing. This is a bunch of people. There are entire cottage industries built on faking things, follower counts, the source of information, real information. We just had a major home run ball go out the park, faking somebody. We used deep fake technology to make Kenny Mayne look like he was talking about something 20 years ago that just happened today. And all of that's going to intensify. So this is going to be so much noise. It's going to be so much mental pollution that you are best prepared for it by knowing what to measure, knowing what matters, and really, really sticking to that, no matter what you do.
And with that, I gotta say thank y'all so much for this amazing time. Y'all had an hour of your lifetime. Y'all could have spent it anywhere else, but y'all spent it with us, the Class of Culture. And I just gotta say thank y'all so much again for coming on. And by the way, are y'all on LinkedIn? Can we reach out to y'all on LinkedIn if we have our own personal questions?
Yeah, of course.
Everybody?
Absolutely.
Amazing.
What we got to do? We got to drop it in the chat. We'll get it out.
As a matter of fact, yeah, everybody real quick, just drop your LinkedIn's in the chat. And I just got to say thank y'all again so much. We really do appreciate y'all. And thank y'all for coming on the Class of Culture. For my culturalettes, my participants, we really do appreciate y'all. And remember that culture is not just who we are, what we are, and what we do. It's about just doing our thing every day, one piece and one step at a time. And thank y'all for taking these pieces of time and sharing it with us, as well as the nuggets of knowledge.
Absolutely.
That will be another session of culture.
It's been a pleasure.
Mm-hmm. All right, y'all. Y'all be safe during this whole pandemic season. Be safe, pray it up, and just thank y'all so much again.
Thank you. Respect.
Take care.